Welcome back, you filthy, I guess, Diablo 4 players in this case. So, I sort of was paying attention to some really basic questions around how to access Nightmare Dungeons. So, like all of us in the initial days, I sort of got to this game a little late after launch, and I was like, well, how the F do I get to Nightmare Dungeons? Now, before I go into like what they are or whatever, really quickly, Nightmare Dungeons are basically the end game to this game. At this stage of the game, there's no like pinnacle bosses or anything like that that we can target farm outside of like world bosses. So it's Nightmare Dungeons is where you're going to get all your loot. You complete a Nightmare Dungeon and you'll get a legendary drop usually and a chance for a unique or whatever. The higher the level of the Nightmare Dungeon, and it goes from 1 to 100, the better the loot. And I'll show you what that looks like shortly. So how do you get to Nightmare Dungeons? Really simply, after you get to about level 50, pretty much all you're going to be doing after level 50 is what I would recommend doing, is just running Tree of Whispers dungeons, which are these red highlighted dungeons here. Now, this is after you do your capstone dungeon to get into, I guess, Torment, or to World Tier 3, if you want to call it that. So you can see out here, I'm running World Tier 3, so you don't need to go any further than World Tier 3 until you get to level 70. So then basically you'll do Tree of Whispers dungeons, and I just would say focus on Tree of Whispers dungeons. 2 dungeons, 5 points each to Tree of Whispers. You get a chance at a legendary drop each time, which could get you the gear that you need. And then eventually what will happen is you'll get a side quest from Demyan, and then basically it'll basically do your first Nightmare Dungeon. So pretty much all you need to do is keep running dungeons, keep running dungeons, keep running dungeons. And I'd say by the time you get to about level 55, at that point, you'll have what's called a sigil drop within a dungeon. That will complete this, and then basically it's as simple as you go into whatever it is. So I've got a tier 1 sigil here, and then you right-click the sigil, consume sigil to activate a Nightmare Dungeon at Moorwood, yes. And then basically you go back to your map, bam, Moorwood, that's your Nightmare Dungeon. So then you just need to find your way to the dungeon, and then you can go raid the dungeon and loot the shit out of it. And then basically that's it. You'll complete the quest. See, Jorgen has activated a Nightmare Dungeon. And so you'll complete Demyan's quest, and then this will unlock the ability to craft sigils, which you can do from tier 1 to 5, through to 6 to 10, through to 11 to 15, through to 16 to 20. And then you do Ancestral all the way down to tier 100, which is the hardest in the game. And obviously, if you go to Torment or World Tier 4, then that'll be even harder again. And or you can salvage sigils, which is pretty simple. They just go here, and then you would just basically salvage them, and you get some material sigil powder. And then each time you run a dungeon, you get sigil powder, and so on, so on. You know the gist. Basically, that's the easiest way that I've found to get into doing Nightmare Dungeons. And then basically, it's rinse and repeat. And by about level 50, where am I? 57 now, I'm doing like tier 5 to tier 8. And so, like, if you're a POE player like me, the simplest way to look at this is these are basically just maps. These are early tier maps, and then they tier up, and they're divisible by 10 based on, or a little bit more based on what we do in POE. But basically, that's all the end game is. That's the major end game outside of like Helltide, and outside of doing anything else in the end game that you want to do, basically. And you just rinse and repeat that until you get the gear. You keep leveling up, and then you keep gearing up, you keep paragoning up, and then you just do harder and harder sigils until you can do level 100. And that's basically all you have to do. So just a quick recap. So once you get to level 50, all you want to do is start doing Tree of Whispers dungeons, these ones in red, until your quest marker comes up, your side quest for Demyan comes up, and then basically, yep, you're good to go. And then just keep checking your consumables. Now, these are denoted and look like this when they drop in a map. So you'll see Shadow Plunge, Nightmare Sigil, bam, once you see one of those drop in a dungeon, hunky-dory, you can do Nightmare Run dungeons. Anyway, that's it from me. Don't forget to like and sub to the channel. Probably going to do a little bit of Diablo 4 content before we get really heavy into PoE again, and PoE 2 in particular before ExileCon. But if you got any questions, hit me up, and or until next time, have a good one, and bye.